Hey up, welcome to DevHeads, the podcast focused on the ins, outs, and goings on of game development, with host experience ranging from indie, double to AAA. I'm Jay, joined by my wonderful co-host Tina
Hello, how's it going?
and Mikey.
Hello.
And today we have an extra special guest, Mr. Pete Blumel.
Hello.
Hey, Pete. Long time no
Pete.
see.
For real, it's been a hot minute.
Yeah.
So, Pete, tell us a little bit about yourself. What are you about?
What am I about, man? I've been around the block in the entertainment industry for the better part of my career. I worked either at DreamWorks or Activision. I was at Activision back in the early days, like MechWarrior 2, Muppet Treasure Island, which I joke is one of like the first transmedia projects. I think, at least for me, it was way back then when we were shooting a movie and making the game at the same time. I went to DreamWorks back when it first started, about a year into its inception. Was there for 11 years at animation, then I moved to feature film. And then went back to Activision to work at Infinity Ward when the guys were kind of transitioning from World War II to modern warfare. That's kind of been the bulk of my work, sort of straddling the line between Hollywood production values and Hollywood methodologies and production and all that, and video games, which I love, right? That's kind of where my heart and soul is. Spun out of there, did a couple small companies, and then partnered with Michael Bay, and we got funded by Sony to build a studio to do some work for virtual production and video game ideas, generating IP, also working behind the scenes on some other AAA titles that we've done some white glove support for. And then I also do a lot of production on the side for different projects or consulting. I do a lot of different things that kind of bring in IP and shape IP for video games or immersive experiences or virtual reality or film and television. All these things are kind of finding a place together, and I've liked to think that I've been at the kind of an intersection of a lot of that for the better part of my career at a very high level, understanding like all the players and how to get them all to play together.
Quite the
That's
name
very
drop,
cool.
too. Michael Bay.
I'm still on MechWarrior 2, actually.
I'm still on Muppet Treasure Island, honestly.
MechWarrior 2 was pretty cool back then. It was, man, I mean, we had that trailer that we did. We had like a little a teaser reel we did with Digital Domain and with the Timberwolf kind of, they were, too much.
Yeah, I remember that, I think.
We were blown away. We're like, that is the coolest thing ever. This game is going to be so awesome. There were not even textures on the ground back, right? It was awesome. But really good experience. It was really fun to work on that, and that's how I got into production. And you start as a tester, then you get into production testing. Lead, coordinator, and make your way up. And so I've really come from the realm of understanding how to make a video game, how to QA it, all the way to how to like do cash flow and P&L and all the boring stuff that comes with kind of being a studio leader. So my heart's still.
What haven't you done, man? Like, you're a Renaissance man, like through and through. You've touched so many.
In games you kind of have to be, right, and you guys
Yeah.
know this too. Like, you wear a lot of hats, and
Yes.
Today, right? I mean, we all know this. Today, to make a video game, you've got to know how to deal with actors, whether it's signing them on and working with them, like A-listers, right? Voice acting and stuntmen are still a really big thing, even more so. And then you got to know technology. You got to be able to talk to coders and engineers and everything in between, and then talk to the publisher about what they expect, right? What
And they
want.
all speak a very different language.
They really do.
Yeah. And I don't
really
think
do.
a lot of gamers understand that. Like, to communicate effectively with an engineer versus like an artist, or even like you said, talent, you have to use a different way of communicating. And it's almost like a challenge sometimes, right? Because there's always disagreements or hurt feelings, and I don't envy having to navigate all that.
The way I kind of think of it in my head is like every video game shouldn't exist because it's just this like crazy production and combination of people that just somehow produced something. And it's like messy and beautiful at the same time, and all those nice lofty words that we use because it's just a crazy organized artistic effort. And I'm kind of curious, Pete, like as far as like team sizes and stuff that you've worked on, like what's some of the bigger sizes and what are some of the smaller sizes? And is there like, I assume there's a big difference, right? I assume the Hollywood ones are bigger, but maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah, I mean, games are bigger than. I mean, when Call of Duty now is hundreds of people, right? Even more. A film cannot be that much unless it's an animated film, like a traditional animated picture is several hundred people around the world. But I found the sweet spot to be like 100, 150. You get to know people's names. You get to know what they do. I mean, Tina, we work together. You've seen it. I miss the days when you could know everybody's name. And more importantly, when you're in a meeting, because you do switch gears, you're in an animation meeting, then you're in a technology meeting, and sometimes they're about the same topic or not, and you're trying to silo things and bring them together and not have friction. But knowing as a production person, as a producer, like, can this happen or not? And it's good to always know who literally is going to do it, so that you can come up with an assessment to say, that's going to take a little longer than we think, or no, the guys can handle that because we know that it's animation, then it's rigging, then it's audio down the line, and all those people to be involved, and can each of them buy into the idea and do it. And when the team gets too big, now you're talking to other producers, and so I've definitely worked on things with like a dozen people, and we've done a few things like that, and we've done things with hundreds, and I think I really enjoy that sweet spot, like I just said, about 70, 80, 90 to 100, 150 on the high end with vendors.
Being able to communicate, right? Like being able to have that face-to-face interaction and understand what people, like you were saying, can handle from their teams, and that only comes from knowing them on that intimate but professional level. And when you're just communicating with other producers, so like I come from the indie scene where there's only at most 3, 4, 5 people working on the project. So when we come up with ideas or production is happening, I intrinsically understand what my team can do and what they're capable of because of that size, and it blows my mind to think of trying to manage and produce on that level. Like you're saying, the sweet spot's 100 to 150 people. I'm like, I couldn't imagine like talking to that many people, let alone intimately understanding their workflow and what they're capable of. It's super impressive.
Before we move on, I wanted to ask if you could move your mic a little bit closer to you, maybe even throw the headset around your neck, because we're picking up, I think, audio from the fan on your laptop.
Oh, you know what? I can kill that. Hold on. I know that was. Hold on.
Kill what? I'm scared.
Got an item underneath the desk. Just kill.
Stab the fan to death.
I'll break the.
Just
how about now?
Yeah.
How's that sound,
Yeah.
Eric?
That sounds better to me. Yeah, maybe just pick up your voice a little bit, just
sure.
like a little louder, and we'll be good.
Sure thing. Yeah.
There we go.
All right. Better.
So
Yes.
I'm really fascinated to talk to you, Pete, about the fact that you've worked both in video games and in the movie industry. And it seems like to me that, when I started out in video games, I don't think Hollywood really took our industry very seriously. It was kind of like a thing on the side. We had Super Mario Brothers growing up in the 90s, I think, as a movie. Kind of like
Some
silly
Mortal Kombat. And
Mortal Kombat, it was kind of like more like a campy type, reaction to video games. And now I feel like video games just completely infiltrated Hollywood because, you have like The Last of Us being nominated for awards. Do you feel like the movie industry now kind of looks at video games differently?
Yeah. Yes, most certainly. I mean, I lived it, right? And it was hard to get people. There's a certain air about making a movie and being a filmmaker because there's so much more pomp and circumstance. You get a red carpet when you finish, right? And there's a big party, and there's a lot of recognition towards certain people. And the devs on games don't necessarily get that as much. And there isn't that kind of fanfare in the same kind of way when you release a game. But just generally, I felt like, was it art, right? Was it considered art? Like a film is art. You go to film school and you learn all these, and in games, it is art too, for sure, all day long. I don't know if it was perceived that way. I mean, working where I was, and I really, my whole career, I was trying to champion getting IP transitioned from one to another. Like when I was in animation at DreamWorks and even in feature film, we had talked about Minority Report as a game or AI or, Jurassic Park took a stab at it at one point. and certainly all the animated movies. But the animated movies always fell into a consumer product bucket. It didn't fall into the hands of creatives. And so on the consumer product side, it's looked at like as a toy or coloring book or anything else. So it wasn't always looked at as a way to build the story world, build the characters, all that kind of stuff. Today, it's obviously a form that can really make sense, or immediately can really make sense in film. Fallout's another great example, but there's plenty, and they're hit and miss still. I mean, for their own reasons. But I think if you really take time and look at the IP, there's lots of IP in gaming. Because I really believe some of the most creative people I've ever met are in games as well, not just film, but in games. And I think today, and we saw this back in Call of Duty when we started making decent numbers that rivaled Hollywood weekends and total box office draw, or global. Then all of a sudden became a question like, hey, I got bombarded with questions, including my partner now, right? Who was like, hey, man, I see these games and they look a lot like my movies and my shots. And he wouldn't be wrong. I mean, we certainly had influence from all kinds of filmmakers making Call of Duty and Modern Warfare. So, yeah, I mean, Hollywood's come around, to answer your question.
What do you think has helped them come around, or why do you think that they take video games more seriously now?
I think the stories are more, when you're working on Nintendo, when you're playing Nintendo games, and maybe that's what people still think are video games for the most part, or Fortnite. There isn't story and character, but then you look at Last of Us and other really big titles, God of War and so forth, and there really are. So I think filmmakers are seeing that there are indeed really great stories that are told on the medium that can't be told in other mediums on flat surface as well, like they're experiential. Second, it's money. I mean, they see that it's doing well, and Hollywood has had a great summer so far. But generally speaking, it's hard. It's hard to get a project green light. I'm in the middle of those too. Like to get a green light on a movie or TV show you go through a lot of steps and regime changes, and then it might go, it might not. So games are still an interesting way to have a storyteller get in and tell stories in a different format. Expand their brand, and I'm right in the middle of those kinds of things. But I think it's intriguing because I think there's a place where Hollywood and games can come together. You have to be very careful how to do that, but it exists. There's ways to get them to work together.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but AAA games tend to make a lot more than blockbuster movies, right?
Typically, if the game does well, right? I mean, we've been fortunate to work on some pretty big titles, but even games in moderate success, 5 million, 6 million, do better than the average,
movie
theatrical release. Yeah,
it's wild.
Yeah, it is crazy.
I think something beautiful that might not be considered with adapting a video game into the movie format is how it can help bridge the gap between, basically show an audience that wouldn't necessarily be able to get into games, showing them that this, like The Last of Us, for example. I have friends who never play games but watched The Last of Us TV show, and it made them intrigued where it came from, and that was their gateway into understanding that games can tell whole interactive narratives. And I think that adaptation, there's a huge benefit to it, cross-pollination between them rather than one just benefiting from the other. There's this merger, which I think is beautiful.
I agree.
There's definitely something to be said for the gateway. I'm thinking of it in a different context, but I'll bring it up anyway because I think it's similar. How many people got into Arma and milsims, a very esoteric, very gated sort of hardcore genre, just because they heard about DayZ online from content creators or social media, and they downloaded Arma 2 to play that, and then eventually now they're playing milsim games, even though the barrier to entry to that is so high. I feel like there's something to be said there where somebody could watch the Fallout show and be like, oh, an open world RPG sounds intimidating to me. This world seems cool, though. Maybe I'll try it. Especially because games are, I think, relatively speaking, compared to the 90s, a lot cheaper. Maybe not the AAA ones, but generally speaking, there's a lot of really cost-effective options to get into that.
There's data to support it as well, right? I don't know the exact numbers, but the player rate of Fallout 4 blew up after the TV show came out. Not only were players returning to play it, but a new influx of people were going to interact with that, and it's just, they feed off each other. This reinforcement loop where they're both going to help each other succeed. And I think it's really beautiful that people like yourself, Pete, have been for so many years encouraging this, and it's going to help both industries grow into a new space, which is really, really nice.
I think so. I mean, it's been something I've really wanted to do forever, and I had the opportunity now to kind of explore it and build it. And it's not easy, especially working in the Hollywood system and the Hollywood lawyers and studios and all those fun things that you just have to navigate as a producer. The contracts even, right? Mm-hmm. But and that just took years, just the contracts at a certain high level, right? But we did all that, so there's a precedent already set. We have a blueprint to do it. On my side, and it wasn't easy. It took a long time to create something from scratch, not just an IP you're adapting from one way or another, but to create a brand new IP and say, this is a movie, we're developing the movie at a studio, we're developing this project as a game, right? And how to get them to play together is absolutely not easy, but it's really, really worthwhile doing. For me, I just think it's cool. I just think, at a certain stage of my life, I want to try new things and push new ways of doing things. And I do believe that, like you just said, that if you build a world and you play to the audiences right, you can expand the world rather than just making a copy of one side or the other, right?
Yeah.
In one.
100%.
Totally agree.
Yeah, that's one thing gamers don't realize is when you work in Hollywood and you work on a project, like you produce Shrek or all the things you worked on, you go from like job to job. It's not a consistent paycheck. Whereas in video games, you can definitely, as a developer, land a gig where you're just constantly paid the same salary no matter what project you're working on. Even if you don't have one, you're kind of just pretty much set, right?
In production, I was lucky I was an employee at DreamWorks, right? So I wasn't on production, but typically there are, like in animation, there are certainly like a game studio. Animated studios are like game studios, right? So you keep all your animators and you hope to get another project or a sequel, and off you go, and you keep rolling with it. On movies, though, for sure. And again, I was staff at Amblin, right? So I was part of the Spielberg staff, so I didn't have to worry about that. But on the productions, where you build up the whole team and then you wind them down, I saw that over and over and over again. That's how that is. When you're a crew member, you just got to find the next movie, and that is tricky. So if you and hopefully it's a big movie like Transformers or Jurassic, lots of CG, and there's you film it, but then the crew after that has a lot of time to create content. On the post side, animation basically is what it amounts to. Those can be a job for quite a while.
Can you speak a little bit to the Hollywood side trying to break into video games? Like you see Annapurna has a segment for games. I think Netflix has their own arm where they're trying to publish their own games now.
Yeah. Annapurna is pretty amazing. They've managed to find some beautiful indie darlings that actually monetize. They've been great successes financially as well, but they tell such amazing stories. And I don't know if you guys read, whoops, sorry, that was my microphone. I don't know if you guys just read, but they just, I think I saw some kind of co-dev or funding collaboration deal with Control 2. And I love Control, by the way, that was super cool. But it's a bigger step for them because it's more into the AAA space than what they've been doing. But yeah, they've if you know the founder, Megan, who started Annapurna, she loves video games. She's one of the most clever people I've sat down and talk with and meet with. So that's an interesting example because they are actually hitting a really cool. They're telling stories that all their games are beautifully told indie stories, right? That's their shtick. But there's lots of like Skydance is doing it too, right? Skydance, her brother, same thing. They've got it.
They're siblings.
They are, yeah. Megan.
Oh, I didn't know that.
And so I won't speak. From the outside looking in, right? So Sky handles the bigger projects, and then Annapurna was more of the darlings that can find money and voice for some of these amazing indie darlings. But yeah, same thing. Like right, and Netflix has got an interesting model because they don't need to monetize the same way traditional publishers do because they have a subscription base. So if they can simply add value to their user base and their subscribers with more content, then as a developer, I think it's really refreshing not to have the same kind of, you know, thing in financial responsibilities imposed on you from the higher level, you know, and on the team as it disseminates down to make money in a certain way, right? It's like, oh gosh, we have to have DLC in a long tail. Those things can happen more organically, naturally, because you kind of, they've allocated money to the project. I would assume, and then that subscriber base will sort of pay for it. You know, I don't think they're going to charge for games anytime soon. It's just part of your model for your subscription.
What are you going to say, Mike?
I was going to ask this kind of a question for all of us. I'm thinking about examples of really good movie tie-in or show tie-in video game movies or shows that then became video games, excluding the ones that came recently. Because I do think it used to be a mixed bag, but now it's finally getting better. Like the money's being put in, the effort, the production. And I'm just curious to hear from all of you, like, what are some of your favorite examples of some teams that got that right, put a movie or show into a game?
I've got mine, which is instant. It's from the team at Ubisoft, headed by Michel Ancel, who did Peter Jackson's King Kong, the video game, which
Good
is
one.
Unbelievably good. It's this weird, half of the game is a weird Skull Island immersive sim when you're playing as Jack Driscoll, and having to use the environment to ward off dinosaurs and, you know, navigate the environment with the natives and stuff. And then the other half is a third-person beat 'em up game where you play as King Kong.
Yeah,
And,
fuck yeah.
You know,
With a minimal HUD
good.
too, right? It's super immersive.
Yes,
I remember.
minimal HUD, first person. It's incredible, and the team that worked on it, my favorite game of all time, Beyond Good and Evil. That team then worked on this game in between working on the Rayman series, and to just come out with this, it could have been easy, and a lot of the times it is easy to just kind of churn something out because it's got the IP, and that's the old way of doing it, right? And this is my favorite example of, and I know Peter Jackson was heavily involved with the production and actually like making it make sense within the narrative. The voice actors are all the actors from the game, like you were speaking to, Pete, coordinating all of that and getting this to line up with the release of the movie, which is already, you know, one of the biggest movie projects ever put together. I'm just in awe at how any of that could come together. So big shout out to that. And I know Marty on Second Wind is going to be covering this on the archive, his show. So yeah, that kind of lines up.
Nice. I really liked Toy Story 3. I think it was on Xbox 360, if I remember correctly. I think Avalanche
I never
did
played
it.
that one.
Yeah, I never played that. That's interesting.
It was a lot of fun. And then they had this like story, what do they call it? Toy box mode, which eventually became what was their toy version of Skylanders? I forgot the name of it.
Oh, what do you mean? Like there's a different version, like Disney Infinity?
Yes. So they made Toy Box mode in Toy Story 3. It was like the coolest thing I've ever at the time played, right? Because you could just open world, do whatever you want. There was new stuff that would pop up. You would get like cars unlocked. You could like make your own town. It was just like a really cool place to hang out and do crazy things. And then Disney Infinity came out from that mode, and I thought that was great.
There's birth from it. That's crazy.
Mm-hmm.
What about you, Pete?
Yeah, I'm really trying to think because I only remember the ones that didn't really hit it for me. I do agree King Kong was amazing, and I remember it only having like 8 achievements. They're really, I just played through it.
It was from that era, right? You could get away with just a few achievements.
Yeah, not a ding against it. It was like an interesting thing when you're trying to, like, you know, add so many achievements into games back then. And you're right, it was a labor of love. You could tell there was love put into it. I mean, I don't know. Going back, I think, you know, we joked up Mortal Kombat, but that was like, as a person who played a lot in the arcade, I thought, oh, this is kind of cool. The first one, right? Yeah,
that was a good ass movie.
Yeah, it was.
Straight
I mean, you
I
know,
knew what it was.
It was cheesy. It was
ridiculous.
Look,
but
listen,
at the
let me
same
give
time-
some context. Yeah, campy was the word Tina used, but that's good. That's fine. It knew what it was, in my opinion. I mean, it was fun. It was good.
I mean, it's probably part of the reason why, you know, like, I think that was, you know, that was part of the reason to Tina's question earlier about like Hollywood looking at things when they're so campy, and then you've got like the string of movies by that Uwe Boll, was it? All these crazy.
Yeah.
Oh, I remember
The German.
him.
I think he's German.
Yeah. The guy who boxed his journalist rival or whatever.
That was ridiculous. Yeah, I remember
haven't
that.
heard that guy's name
what
in
a
a
memory.
long time.
Yeah, I don't know how that just popped in my head, but I was like, so I always thought, like in my head, I was thinking what not to do, and so when I would have these conversations at Amblin, like with Steven and with the people, the stakeholders, because little people don't always know this, but Steven Spielberg's a big gamer, and in fact, it was part of the Medal of Honor, what made Medal of Honor, and then that team became Call of Duty, yada yada, and so forth. But finding the right way to line up to the brand, and back then, filmmakers saw the value, but it wasn't what it is today, where you can really tell stories now. So the campy aspects and directors that made really low budget, poorly adapted movies just to get a buck out of the the incentives program out of Germany or whatever, aren't the way to go. Now we can see that there's art, and if you put love into it and you really think about the IP, King Kong's a great example, and everything more recently. Then you'll get something really worth playing that has charm and character and immersive qualities, and that should be a good game. So, anyway,
do you guys know what happened with Uwe Boll? He
No.
opened up a bunch of restaurants, and they did really well. Yep.
Really?
Yeah.
That makes sense.
This was in the late 2010s. And in 2020, his restaurant won a gold award for Best European Restaurant at the 2020 Vancouver Magazine Awards. Uwe was quoted as saying, "It's interesting, right? I had to open up a restaurant to get good reviews."
Oh my god.
Oh, I kind of hate that.
Oh
He was.
my God.
I didn't watch many of his movies. I appreciate what he was doing, even if I wasn't a big fan of the movies. Kind of like, someone's got to trailblaze, someo's got to experiment. Yeah. I remember the boxing fight was ridiculous. That was so early internet in my head. Just a strange occurrence, but I guess made sense for the time, and certainly drew a lot of attention. But I think it was him and Lotax from Something Awful. Yeah, right. Here we are, right, talking about it.
It's funny, and you're right. He was a trailblazer. He tried to do something that wasn't quite. I mean, you need a budget to tell a good story. A good game story in a movie. I think, right? Like it's hard, and a good script and a good talent and actors and all those fun things. And it's easier today than it was back then, right? And then you need a good everything.
That's true.
And money pays for that. And studios today see it where they didn't before. I mean, we can go on and on about Mario and Sonic, and everything's being adapted now, and they're really helping.
That's true. Sonic.
I mean, look at
Pokemon.
Exactly, right.
What was the big hit on Netflix with Henry Cavill?
The Witcher.
Oh, The Witcher.
The Witcher, yeah.
That helped us. You know what they did was, so they released The Witcher, then they released the Nintendo Switch version, right? And then The Witcher as a game kind of got a little bump in sales. So that's when you do it right. Cyberpunk fixed their game after a rocky release, and then had a show, the animated show, and that I think helped a little bit too. I think those all
It
go.
definitely does. I sat down with the devs of Witcher and Cyberpunk at GDC this year to talk to them about just that, and the shows were mentioned as like they reclaim a lot of goodwill that was lost because of the kind of self-admitted botched release of Cyberpunk 2077. And that was a gateway to bring people back into the DLC that fixed a lot of those issues. And I think when gamers, because a lot of people are used to seeing less than stellar adaptations, the Mario movie and, whatever people think of Mortal Kombat, I love it, but, some people always point to those things. So when adaptations are shown that clearly have so much love and respect for the source material, it really brings people back in, and that cross-pollination can begin again. And it's a really smart way of doing it.
I feel like
Expensive,
Fortnite's really taken advantage of cross-pollination with Hollywood IP.
Yeah.
It's like everything they do. There's just some random character. I was like, oh, John Wick, what's up?
Yeah, in Fortnite, right? It's kind of nutty. The power of brand, right?
Yeah, it's wild.
That kind of recognition, and how it's been created to to monetize, it's a little crazy.
Remember
It
seeing
would not. You
emails.
would not have foreseen that from a financial or design perspective. If you wrote that down and presented this to anybody, right? Oh, we're gonna have all these random characters fighting each other, and that's gonna make sense. Why? I mean, there were things we didn't put in Call of Duty because it didn't make sense in the world, right?
Can you share
it's different
some?
today. It's different
What
today.
Yeah. Can you share? I know.
Yeah, I'm curious if you can share.
Kojima visited the studio a lot back then, right?
He did, and I got to meet him, and he signed a copy of Metal Gear 4 for me. It was amazing. And then
Shit.
we connected again. It was just not too long ago. But because there was talk like could we potentially explore like a crossover, but it just the stars didn't align, and it was more on a business side. I think it wasn't too involved in it.
Oh, business! Wow.
But it might have been.
Yeah.
And we'd have to recreate the characters because they have a different, like the way they model and create their characters in their game are different. So like getting assets over would have been just another thing. Although that's trivial in the grand scheme of things.
I remember putting Predator and Ghosts, I think, right?
Yeah,
And
that was like one of the
tedious and difficult that was to just get Predator in the game.
It was, yeah. I was in the middle of that, right? That was one of the last things I think I had done, and I think we know the artist that made that. By the way, kick-ass. One of the I think Fox had said this is one of the nicest models we've seen for a Predator that wasn't like in a movie, but like it's a CG, just the high res. It was really cool, and that deal was pretty straightforward because we have the latitude to we have a big title. I mean, people are almost willing to give it to you for nothing to get the the exposure. But like the other games, like do you guys remember like oh, I don't know. It's funny, like because Axe was in a Rainbow Six or something, wasn't it? I forget, or one of those Vegas or something.
Oh,
it didn't
Axe,
make sense to have like a body spray in a shooter.
The body spray.
Or something. I may be wrong, and that just wouldn't work in COD, right? So it just was like the guys who were running Infinity Ward, at least in our silo, were like, Remington. I did all the deals for all the things you saw in the game. Remington, EOTech, all the military stuff, Pentagon, yada yada. That was straightforward. But any other brands were kind of tricky. But then look, like Kojima puts, is it Monster, wasn't it, into Death Stranding, and
Yeah.
nobody bats an eye. So I think it depends on the product too. Kojima gets a lot of latitude that the rest of us don't in the industry. Like nobody else gets it, I feel.
That's fair. There is a sense of like leeway and who's it coming from. By the way, Pete, you could just pick up your voice a little bit. You're coming in a little quieter, just a heads up.
All right. Yeah, just keep telling me.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, Kojima's definitely crossed over into Hollywood. He hobnobs with directors and stuff.
Man wants to be a director.
50% movies or something.
I love his reviews, by the way, on Twitter. Like when he hates something, he just says, "I watched it."
Right. He says nothing.
I was present.
Deeply respectful.
Yeah, I love it so much. He's like, I watched this film. I'm like, damn.
He's doing a movie, right? Like he's starting the new IP with Kojima Productions on a new espionage series, and they're doing a movie at the same time, right?
I didn't know that.
Well, they're definitely doing the Metal Gear movie. What's the name of the actor?
Well, I doubt he's involved in that because Konami have cut all ties with him, right? So
right. Okay. I was thinking of the Metal Gear movie with Oscar Isaac. I forget his name. The guy from Triple Frontier. And
Oscar Isaac is playing.
Wait, I'm sorry. I might be confusing. Hold on.
You mean Poe Dameron?
I'm learning stuff today.
I could have sworn that there was going to be a movie, Metal Gear Solid, with Oscar Isaac as Snake. The Oscar Isaac from Triple Frontier, Dune. Am I wrong? What the?
Potentially.
This might have been.
No, I haven't heard of.
Maybe it was a rumor.
I heard of that.
Know.
It may have been a rumor or a fever dream, or you're right. It's one of the three.
That's true. Thank you, Jay, for grounding me.
It's fine.
I'd go see that movie.
It sounds
right. I would too.
It is a shame.
This is where you got to make these deals. Like he still created that, right? I mean, I grew up playing those games, so he should at least get like an executive producer credit or something. I'm sure he won't because it's owned completely by
Konami.
Konami. So, but in a deal going forward, as I look at this is where I do a lot of these deals for IP because you want to own the IP as much as you can and license it or at least have concessions to give up ownership later or parts of it, right? But that's all I've been doing is trying to figure out how do you protect the developers and the creatives on both sides that create something before you sell it off to a studio. We all know that eventually you'll have to sell off your IP if you want to, like it's inevitable at some point, but how much can you control it? How much can you at least put in some, writers or there's no reason why Kojima could not at least be involved as a consultant or something. But I know there was a fallout. And by the way, fallouts happen all day long in the creative space. But that's what, contracts and producers and agents like to help keep it together, because I think the movie would be better if he was involved even in some
100%.
degree, right? 100%.
Yeah.
And so
Konami would bring back a lot of goodwill by fostering those relationships again, and actually being like, yeah, we are making a movie on Metal Gear and we have brought Kojima in to consult on certain things. I just did some reading. Apparently Death Stranding, A24 are doing a Death Stranding adaptation, and the next espionage game that Kojima is doing with Sony is going to have a movie coming out at the same time that they're currently working on. So all interesting things, and I think worthy of movie adaptations. It's just whether the movie adaptation of the new espionage game from him and his team is not a retelling of the same source, but an accompaniment. I think that's an area of movies and films that hasn't been explored a lot of, exploring an area of the world that the game isn't and having it as a companion piece to bounce off of each other. I think that could be really interesting.
Speaking of those unfortunate aspects of the industry, I'm curious to hear from you, Pete. What's one of the things that you really don't like about working in this space? Like, what's one of the really difficult things, or one of the things you wish would change about working in the Hollywood production space?
Well, everyone is, Hollywood is still trying to figure out games, like virtual production is one thing where they, people talk about it like it's some amazing thing, right? But virtual production is basically like in gaming, we do this every day. It's not, that's not black magic. It's like the tech is, and sometimes you bump into a bit of, like processes that kind of cross over, and so there's old school ways of doing things. And I'm using this as an example of the broader thing, whether we're talking about, agents coming in to get involved, or studio heads, or any part of the production. There's a way to produce something in a movie that people have been doing forever, whether it's production design and the way they concept 3D models, and then how you would do it if you're on a game side, which is, I would argue, more efficient, because I can take 3D models and put them right into a game and even use them for final pixel in certain shots in a movie, right? If you have depth of field, you can. So there's more efficient ways I think games have been making things, because they've been around. They're a little newer, and this whole process is newer, but in film, it's a very old school thing. So that mindset is sometimes hard to kind of rub against and get people to kind of work together, especially at high levels. And so again, it's back to us talking about how do you get the different luminaries to all want to work together and create something, and these are slow nudges you're doing, like little till you get to a point where you achieve it, but it takes time, and it takes a lot of nudging and a lot of just gentle caressing and massaging, if you will. But it's like the old school Hollywood model of making movies there's just a way to do it, whether you're financing the movies, filming the movies, editing the movies, where games are iterative and we're figuring things out right away, all the time. We're changing the way we make a game between titles, right? You ship a game and then all this new stuff you want to incorporate comes up, and they may need new people or different people. So that's the thing. Like, it's like we're more iterative and more like, seat of the pants, figure things out. Film is very rigid, and they're still learning how to adapt. And so the changes they're making are a little more granular towards, right? That makes sense, right? That's
slower to change.
I'm in the middle of that.
Got it.
Yeah, right. It sounds like you're saying there's kind of like a development disparity of sorts, where Hollywood film production, whatever, is a little more not traditional, but it has a set way that's not so iterative, whereas game development is iterative and would expect that out of the work they do together, but it's just not. Like, there has to be a sort of marriage or a balancing between the two.
Especially as real-time engines become more and more prevalent.
Yeah. Go ahead, Jay. Sorry.
Yeah, the question is, sorry, Ludo. You've had your cuddles. Off you pop.
We heard a good pop
Aw.
there.
So the question is, so I studied film before I went into games, and it was my first love. And I think it's an interesting point you raised, Pete, which is the iterative nature of games and the rigidity of movies and film production. Is that because it's a separate medium, or is that because the industry at large in games is so young in comparison to movies? Like, do we have a lot of the things solved, or is it kind of geared towards technology? There's been a lot of technological leaps in games that have been happening recently, but in movies we've kind of unless we're moving into like 4D and 3D and stuff like that, we're not making a lot of leaps that are going to change how the production works. But in games, that's happening all the time. Is that because of the age?
I think it's a little of both. Yeah, and I think it's just a culture too, like you said. Like there's just the way we're always trying to figure things out. Not that they don't do that in film too. I mean, there are shots that can't happen that get made, right? Directors, especially the big ones, ask for certain shots, and you know, like a guy like Bay builds his own cameras. I've had the fortune of working with some pretty prominent VFX supervisors who are asked for a shot, and then we have to figure it out in the game engine and then make that real, right? But we shoot physically. So we shoot as it was a physical shot in the engine with trackers and all that, and then we can then know that we can do that shot on location because we've actually physically shot it with handheld cameras, right? But those innovations are few and far between.
Yeah, I do see. Man, I wish I was better with names. The The Lion King and The Mandalorian are using video game tech, and that's taking Hollywood by storm, right? Where they have environment artists create the world, and then they project it on like a big dome screen. And that's better for a shot than like a green screen, right? Because it's like more realistic lighting for
the lighting. Can bounce off the actors.
Sequence. So like all of Mandalorian is taking place in most of it's in like filmed in a little dome, right? With just video game art in the background. Yeah, and I think that's cool. I think it's fascinating that we're starting to sort of like
it's restrictive.
Involve our tech
in restrictive.
Yeah,
it's beneficial in some ways, but also in others, it can restrict the shots that the cinematographer or the director can request.
Sure.
If they're going to use the volume, like they kind of have to be using a lot of static shots, so they can film from specific angles and stuff like that. I think it's definitely an interesting progression of technology using Unreal to automatically just be like, okay, so in this framing, I don't like the way this landscape looks. This boulder over here is intrusive and is drawing the eye. They can automatically just move it instantaneously and frame up the shot, and the lighting and everything then is done perfectly. If we can get that on a bigger scale, I think that's a crazy leap for movies.
Yeah, Unreal Engine's with Hollywood, I think, on improving that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm curious to see where that goes.
Yeah,
I mean, the volumes are getting bigger and more robust. Mandalorian, like a lot of the talking head shots are on volume, in a volume, and then they kind of do CG for the big action sequences still, traditionally. But also helps the actors get more immersed than yelling at a fake dragon, or like a puppet, right, or whatever. At least they felt in an environment when they're interacting with props. But so that's helpful. But yeah, it can be like on a feature Mandalorian's TVs, right? But on a feature film, when you have big shots and you have your 360 shots and huge cranes, we've actually had to devise turntables and moving screens to try to capture what a big filmmaker would want to do if they were in that volume, and it ends up being expensive. So for feature film, it's curious how much you can do. Again, like talking head shots, easy. The bigger shots, I think from the numbers we've crunched, it's arguable that you might just want to go shoot it. The funny thing is, though, that a lot of like physical locations are coming back, right? Like there's some beauty in being out in the desert, and filming, and doing those kinds of things that just give some grit to what you see. So there's pros and cons.
Speaking of desert, you kind of helped infiltrate Hollywood into Infinity Ward when you were there. Because they got to do explosions and drive tanks and stuff, and I don't think many people know about this stuff.
Yeah, that was crazy. It felt like, well, okay, so it was all World War II, right? So all these super intelligent, smart World War II buffs making a video game, right? These guys are like, this is what their bread and butter is. And only way you can, learn what World War II is to read about it in history books, right? And then Modern Warfare was like, well, I mean, we can, talk with the Pentagon and talk with the branches and get access. And then we can go get armorers, we can go get Navy SEALs, we can go get machine guns, we can go get black powder and C4, and those all sound so different when you detonate them, right? And then it was like, and I think designers should go hang out with, Marines for a day or two and do some live exercises and understand what it means to be out in 29 Palms in that heat. Or, when we went to Arizona, those, and sit with Marines or talk to guys who fly Cobras. And there's guys coming back from ongoing conflict. And I would like to think that brought authenticity, because I know from some of the guys, we come out of them, we all look like raccoon eyes because we're covered in dust after a day out there. But you get an understanding what Call of Duty, at least at Infinity Ward, was about surviving, just like the World War II version was, right? No one fights alone, but you're surviving this horrible ordeal. And that's something that I thought was important rather than being a super soldier. And so being out there and understanding that it's a really tough job and you have the utmost respect for every single person, regardless of what they're doing, whether they're infantry or in a tank or in a helicopter or anything between, is kind of cool. I thought it was fun. And it was fun because, we got to understand and empathize with the guys, and hopefully that translated into the game in some aspect.
I gave Eric some photos that I think he showed already, but maybe he can bring them up again, of a 2015 explosive shoot that you and I did together, Pete. That's right. Where we dug up holes, we buried C4, and I don't know what other explosive material we used, but we captured the audio so that we could put it in game. And that was one of the craziest things I've ever been a part of. And can you talk about how that experience came to be? There you were, about 9 years ago. Look at that.
The audio guys always want different sounds, right? So I'm like, okay, so we have to go and brought grenades, all those kinds of things were boring. And even they were kind of new because we were like an early Modern Warfare-ish game, right? Like in the scope of like taking like Hollywood production value, putting it into a game was still kind of new. And so we were.
Which one was this? Just to interrupt you for a sec. Which
Call of Duty 4, COD 4, and then Modern Warfare 2.
The transition to Modern Warfare as a brand.
Right. Because that in that era, there was nothing that wasn't quite a thing yet, right? The production value and the expectations from games weren't even quite there yet. So I don't know what early the first Ghost Recon did or games like that, but
way more low key, way different.
Yeah. I mean, so we really wanted to bring one of the things that Jason West had said was, I want this to feel like a summer blockbuster movie. And I'm like, well, I can make some phone calls because I just came off of Transformers. And again, just working behind the scenes as a guy there on the tech side, but I got to know a lot of people. So, but how that came about with the shoot was, by the time we were in Modern Warfare 2, Modern Warfare 3 at this point, we've recorded so many things. We've shot every kind of gun. You guys, we were pulling guns what other guns could we possibly introduce in the game? Because we've gone through all the staples and then some. But the shoot was, the guys wanted certain sounds. I talked to the armorers. I talked to experts from the film side that record a lot. And they go, well, you really want to get this kind of explosive or this kind of thing at this range because it'll sound different. And you guys will find that very unique. And then, the biggest challenge wasn't getting everyone to finding a venue, whether it's in Arizona or somewhere in California. It's usually better out of state just for the sound and being away from things, right? Kind of like having more space.
Middle of nowhere. Yeah.
Middle of nowhere kind of stuff is always better. And I think we filmed that too with the effects team, right? Some of the explosions. But then it was really, so you get all the people, they all exist, they all do film. It's just getting film guys that come do it for the game. All the equipment, all the armors, all the explosive technicians and all that. But then, it was tricky, and I'd already built this bridge on Call of Duty 4 when I first got there, was with Activision, with the publishing units, because those guys have, people that, executives that look at the insurance and what developers should be doing. Developers should just be sitting in front of a computer.
Shouldn't be doing, yeah.
Totally fair enough. Absolutely. And I go, yeah, but it'd be really good if we can get out there. And so it was like, we had to go through all of this sort of procedure and paperwork and reassurance. And that was just mostly me just talking and talking and talking, showing them all the plans, the budget, of course, which is, neither here nor there really for that, but really just saying, here's what we'll spend, here's what we'll be, here's the people we're hiring. These guys are all like ex-IDF, ex-SEALs, things like that. So no one's, there's risk in everything, but, film does this every day. And I think that people will bring out there on our side, from the dev side, probably be all right. Like there's safety 3 times over, because we don't have safety officers and safety supervisors like they do on film. So I kind of like to act like that on the game side too. Maybe games have that now. I don't know for these kinds of things, but back then it was like, okay, well, what would, thinking about like the safety guy at Amblin.
I like the Wild West a little bit.
He would make sure this, and this were done, and that these papers were filled, and then we had a medic on scene and an evac, right, situation with helicopter, blah, 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 right? All these things you think of, and then it's like, okay. And I know for a fact because another studio didn't do those things, and I got a call from the actors and go, hey, what's going on? I go, well, it's not us.
You're not a part of that. It's not you.
I can help them. So yeah, it's kind of funny. So, but that was the biggest challenge, was kind of get Activision to understand that in this particular game. But I'm like, look, you guys are doing Tony Hawk stunts in a warehouse down the street on a half pipe. Someone could twist their ankle. Like, so this is a little more extreme. We're having heavy ordnance and machine guns and things.
Having the art director.
Hey, man, that's like injury's an injury. So
but injury, twist an ankle, dismemberment.
Huge difference between doing a kickflip and burying some C4.
Both are probably covered by insurance, though.
Yeah, oh my god.
So, but we got the proper insurance, all good, totally legit, up and down. So, and that was a challenge, right? Just getting that. And then once you do it once, then it becomes an easier conversation every time we did it. So, it's part of our production. And I don't know how Treyarch did it. I'm sure the same kind of things, because it was the same. But we did it first, arguably, because we were getting into the Modern Warfare land. So
yeah, I just don't know if gamers understand that. The authenticity and like effort the devs went through to understand the content of their games. It was pretty wild. I recall, when I was like putting the C4 on the ground before someone blew it up. That I think it was you that told us that we can't take a flight within like a few weeks after we've handled explosives, because TSA will detect that material still on your body.
Flagged,
even if you've showered and washed and stuff, you get flagged and you're like, you can't travel. So they're like,
yeah, we always
what have you been up to?
Right, we drove.
I swear it was for work. Yeah.
Yeah, you don't want residue on your hands when you're going through TSA. So
yeah, we had to drive, right? We had to drive all the way to
Arizona. We did. We got a caravan of big SUVs and rolled in there. It was kind of cool, at least. Got to spend money on that and then some good steak dinners. But yeah, it was always easier to drive than it was to fly in that exact. But I mean, authenticity is the most important thing in everything. Like, we have a project right now that I'm currently with my partner, and we're working with NASA. We're working with Kip Thorne and people that really can inform science. I get really jazzed when I can work with people way smarter than me in other realms to help us make what we're doing more real. If you guys will indulge me, like, I don't, like in COD 4, I sent 2 guys to the Middle East, to Egypt, to shoot a lot of what we ended up, the reference photos for what we used in the video game for our desert, our desert combat scenes. And so some people might see Call of Duty 4 missions and go, oh, that's actually assigned in Egypt, not in wherever we were supposed to be, right? This fictitious land, because they were. But same thing. We talked internally. These 2 devs sort of looked Middle Eastern, but not really. But they went there. We found some locals, but we had to have, I had to make sure we had like literally a team of Delta trained operators to extract them within 24 hours if they threw up, a flare. If they needed anything to go wrong there, I could have guys to escort them out of there right away. But so safety is really, really, really important. And that's the balance between authenticity and making sure that where we get it from is absolutely safe. And they have locals on the ground. They had a former, police captain that was taking them to the right places and keep them away from the wrong places in town. So because you can get in trouble really quickly. I mean, as Americans, people may even think you're like CIA. You're an American running with a camera because you don't really. After a few words, no, you're not from there, right?
Yeah.
So it was really important that we laid that groundwork, and the guys were super pro and gung ho to do it, and really kind of integrated like Green Berets practically into there. Took all the pictures and then brought them back, and that's how we kind of made Call of Duty 4. But crazy stuff that again, I let everyone know, and I said, I'll tell you what, we've got an in to somebody that can bring us out of the UAE. We can get operators, we can get them out of there within 24 hours. Signed, done, deal, on deck. So Activision could feel good that nobody was going to get hurt, and even if they did, in the rarest of circumstances, that in a very stable country, of course, that even in the rarest of circumstances, there's a way that we can get them home pretty quickly. So
AAA
well, at least
games,
to speak
games.
a little bit on the. Yeah, I was just gonna. Sorry, Tina, go ahead. Then I'll make my AA comment.
No, that's all I said. That's all I was going to say.
I was just gonna say to speak to the AA, because I've worked on military shooters for a good portion of my career. Insurgency Sandstorm, Dave Infamy, World War II shooter, Onward in VR, working for Meta, and we did not have the money for that. But the way that we tried to achieve that authenticity was, I mean, it was fortunate. We were doing this in the late 2010s, so there was social media. I had the privilege to interview like people that were actually like exchanging gunfire with ISIS in Iraq and Syria, and getting to talk to those people ensures that there's going to be some authenticity. And I also feel like because I was a designer, right? There's a little bit of, I guess you would say, humility. It's a little humbling, right? Because at the end of the day, there's a conversation about like what we're doing is making their job feel very exciting and cool to some degree. And you kind of need a little bit of a gut check from the people who have done that to make sure that you're doing it with like some level of respect and understanding. At least was the philosophy of like what we had, which sounds like you guys had as well on Call of Duty. And talking to those people and hearing what they do is, being a game developer, of course, you're immediately humbled. It's an experience that you feel like you have to get right, at least in certain ways.
No, I agree. And that's, I think, what we wanted to impart when we went there as a dev team, to everyone to come out of there going, man, these guys are doing things that we get to go home to an air-conditioned office and then, pretend like we understand it, and we don't, but we got a good idea. We hear those stories, and they're pretty amazing, and they're young people, right? Way younger than us, 18, 19, 20, some of them. The SEALs and Delta guys older, but you know what I mean? Like the average guys that we talk to. So yeah, it certainly, I mean, I can go on and on. I can bore you guys all day, but I mean, when we did Favela, same thing. I brought in a guy to police. I forget. He was not a chief, but a captain or lieutenant, but someone who'd raided the favelas to tell us, hey, like, how do you guys handle this? Because it's dense. You're uphill battle. You've got it's Swiss cheese, right? You're taking fire from everywhere potentially. It's terrifying. And so he told those stories. And one of the things that really impacted me was how some of these gangs and things, I mean, they put the younger people up first with guns before they hide. It's terrible. Like it is you think about what they have to go through to navigate and do a breach of that kind of urban warfare. What do you want to call it? Man, it's crazy. But then we brought in. But then you have up more beats. I brought in someone that survived, Chernobyl and grew up in Pripyat, and we had her come. Actually, a couple of people, but she was most prevalent to tell us like how things looked. The murals on the walls. Like, did we get this building right? Did we get the pool right? Because she knew firsthand. But any of these conversations really remind you of just how lucky you are, at least for me, I am, to be in, making games and content, and at least to do our best to create entertainment, but try to find a place where we're telling a perspective, we hope, in the realm of making this entertaining and quote unquote fun. But we're hoping, at least in Infinity War, that we were conveying the magnitude of what was happening and the danger. I guess I'd like to think you're right.
Yeah.
So
doesn't
always make it on screen, just like a movie, but you try, right?
I'm in awe at the level of dedication and the lengths you and your team have gone to acquire that authenticity. Like, because a lot of people look at AAA as an industry and see it as a lot of the times money hungry, kind of just let's churn things out and just make as much as we can. But like, to hear the lengths you went to make sure that all of the experiences you were trying to portray in this military shooter were authentic, and the lengths you would go to get that is super impressive, and I respect it massively as someone who in the indie space does just sit in an office. Well, it's the only opportunity I have, right? If I could go to the places and talk to the people of the games I was making, I would do that. But it's so nice that with the resources you have, you are taking those important steps to do so. It's really, really important.
Yeah, it's nice to have a budget for sure, but you want to use it in a ways that makes you different, right? But luckily, everyone at that time, I can't speak to it now. It's been 10 years, but the devs were all very much military enthusiasts in the most positive ways, because World War II really was one of the last great wars, right? And we were the good guys, and everyone understood the magnitude of what would happen if we didn't win that war. And so I think that we just took that sentiment of how we revere the people who serve, regardless of what country they are, because we jump around a lot in the games, and SAS are a big, obviously, and other factions, and then try to take that and move it forward to Modern Warfare, which I think is what differentiated us from sort of these overpowered super soldier kind of stuff that you see. As much as we could. So.
There's still a good amount of super heroics, right, in those games. But I think Call of Duty 4, like, I forget what year that was. What, like 2006, 7, 8? I think then it was a nice balance. You definitely had like that kind of post 9/11 soft fetishization, but that's just what the time was. And then you also had the important balance to it with the Marines, right? And then the working with the Russian separatists or whatever they were, I forget. You had a nice balance there. I think the newer Call of Duties, they lean harder into the soft stuff because it's cooler and more whiz-bang opportunities are there, more globe-trotting opportunities. But that was something I liked about COD 4, is it was still attached to the OG Call of Duty sort of ethos of like, let's talk about the people that are just people that have to go over there and enlisted and signed up to do the service. That was something that was still, I think, maintained in COD 4, and then experimented with new things. Not to say there weren't like secret cool missions in the original Call of Duty, like they were there too when you're blowing up the dam or whatever in COD 1. But the balance was nice in COD 4. I liked the Marines were an important perspective there.
They were.
One thing I wanted to mention to our listeners is that I do see a lot of Hollywood industry folks trying to jump into game development at in a large scale. Like, I worked with animators on Apex that were, that used to work on Frozen or Big Hero 6. You see effects artists jump back and forth between, blockbusters and video games. I don't think a lot of people realize that Hollywood's in a pretty bad slump right now relative to video games. I mean, I know that we have a lot of layoffs happening in video games, but I think there's significantly less work in LA at least right now. And so I'm talking to a lot of folks that are asking, how do we get into games? Like a lot of writers too. You see that crossover happening more and more.
I mean, if they've got a good reel, they should be submitting it. I've for sure used Disney and DreamWorks animators on projects, film stuntmen. I mean, ever since COD 4, we brought in film stuntmen, right? David Leitch, by the way, who's a huge director now, was our first stunt. He was doing motion capture for COD 4, which was a first for us, right? To get away from drawing animations and actually having trained, men that know how to do this, and all the John Wick team ended up being, a section of them became the COD guys, at least in Infinity Ward. But like as far as animators, like animators and voiceover and writers and all those things, like they the same guys working on Transformers can animate some pretty amazing things in a game once you just kind of work out the pipeline, which is important, right?
Yeah.
Transferable skills.
Yeah, for sure. And they're super talented, and then the filmmakers go, oh, I know those guys. So, yeah, they run Transformers. It's super cool. Good to go, right? And then the conversation becomes so much easier, and then you just shape them to help work in the game so that they know how to get their. Basically, you've got to tell them there's no camera. Don't worry about creating your animation to a camera, right? This is for animators. So, I mean, anybody out there listening that wants, put a reel together and submit, right, to all the studios. Try to make friends, get on LinkedIn. For sure, there's talent that can cross over really easily now.
And
Nate in
also
the chat-
onboarding.
Yeah,
Sorry,
that's
Tina.
true. I was going to say, Nate in the chat said, I think gaming forced Hollywood to compete outside of the film industry. So I think is true.
Mhm. Yeah, that's a good point.
Go ahead,
It's
Jay.
more work for everybody, so it's good.
Yeah, what I was going to say was like you were saying, Pete, submit your reel if you work in film or animation and you're thinking about getting into games and you're intimidated by not understanding the pipeline of specific engines or that kind of workflow. It's a huge thing in the industry to onboard new hires into whatever engine you're using or custom engine that is being used for the game. So that is a part of the process. So don't be intimidated by that. It's your skill and your passion that people are looking for, not necessarily your intimate knowledge of a specific system
Or a tool.
Yeah,
exactly. I mean,
Yeah.
Perforce is easy to pick up. I mean, right, and everything else is just sent down chain, like engine and things. It's, if you're an animator or artist, that's not always even your problem. Like, right, you create something within the specs of the game, and off it goes.
100%.
Yeah. So yeah, for sure. If you've got a great reel, send them. Make that real. And by the way, they don't all have to be like super high-end AAA. I mean, so many indie games are out there that have beautiful. I mean, some of those beautiful games are indie games, and in fact, I would argue that most of what I play is more indie than AAA. Even though I do like playing AAA, but there's so many great stories and beautiful art styles that allow you as an artist or an animator, or even as a writer, a creative in any realm, to kind of spread your wings and do really different kinds of things. In the indie space.
Speaking of spreading our wings, did we want to try to do an improv game pitch?
Yeah. Let's
Is
give it a
that
go.
time?
I
Yeah.
think it is.
Pete, if
give
you
it a
have any
go.
ideas or thoughts or comments on any of this, please just chime in, okay? This is
Okay.
the silliest
Yeah,
part.
we're doing this together. This is a group thing, all four of us.
Before we start, before you bring it up, Eric, just to say, everyone in chat, this show and everything at Second Wind is supported by your wonderful donations, be it on Patreon or here in live chats. So if you have any questions or and you want to support the show, please send them in and we'll ask them towards the end of this
We did have a
episode. But for
question,
now-
though, that just came
Oh.
up. We should read that one before we
Snake in the
start.
Garden. Snake in the Garden gives €5. Thank you so much, Snake in the Garden. Says, Pete, would your fave genre be cinematic story forward games or more gameplay loop focused games like Uncharted versus Stardew Valley?
Yeah, I love a good story. I think loops are really important, though, right? I mean, you got to have a compelling reason to keep playing. But the story really, really, to me at least, is important. I remember one of the things that impacted me way back when was like Knights of the Republic. Like, I couldn't stop playing that game because I just wanted to know what would happen next, And the loop was pretty straightforward with just a progression system. And it was very solid, but it was a story. So it just, I guess it really depends. Me personally, I just like a good story, and if the loop is even, just moderately, sufficient, I can play it for a while and not get bored. I mean, I love multiplayer too, but I'm not the best multiplayer player. I've always gravitated towards telling stories. It's my favorite thing to play, my favorite thing to make.
Yeah.
I feel like solid's a good word to describe the loop, because KOTOR was Dungeons and Dragons based, right? I vaguely remember. I think that was it, which works,
roughly.
right?
Yeah. For sure.
All right.
Great game.
All right, let's get into chaos. This is gonna get crazy, Pete. Just
All right,
prepare
Eric,
yourself.
you ready?
Okay. All right,
Okay,
Tina,
so
all
just
right,
before
all
you
right.
say anything, I just want to let the listeners and viewers know that this is the improv game pitch. It was inspired by watching Amnesia Fortnite from Double Fine. Or is it Fortnite Amnesia? No, Amnesia Fortnite.
Amnesia.
Anyways, yes.
So what do
So,
we see here, Tina, for those listening?
Pete worked on Shrek, and Puss in Boots is a pretty cool character. And I was looking at Twitter the other day, and I came across this wizard cat who's pretty thick, orange, cute, wearing a witch's hat, has a little staff of some sort. So, we got to make a game out of this. I have nothing.
I love how you
Okay.
described him as thick.
He's thick.
Yes.
He's cute.
He's thick,
Okay. All I
You can't
know
body
is
shame
that
the cat.
no, you can't
That's
body
true.
shame. I think gamers would be furious if you couldn't pet this cat or romance the cat.
Okay, well, the first question we really
keep
need to
those in
nail
mind.
down is whether this is an NPC or we are playing as said magic cat?
I don't know. If it was an NPC, there's only so much that you can do.
Eric's making the cat.
Oh,
wide.
he's
being extra
No.
wide.
Eric is
Oh,
widening
no.
the cat.
You look like a question.
He does.
I
look,
feel
yeah,
like-
he looks like an
Quest over
NPC to me too. Yeah.
I'm
getting a bit of a horror vibe here from like the harsh
Really?
light in the woods. Well, yeah, like fucking a Blair Witch Project. Light right in the face.
Oh yeah,
Black forest
Mm.
behind.
maybe like a cool juxtaposition between having extremely cute magic creatures, but in a horrible, like nightmarish environment.
There you go.
So you have to
Yeah.
find them. Yeah.
So is it a horror game? Is it? I was thinking RPG.
Well, it could be both. A horror RPG
All right, yeah, that's true.
where the
One second.
animals.
Carry on.
Yeah. The animals are like it's kind of a violent. You guys play Conker's Bad Fur Day? Like, oh, everything's cartoony and silly, but it's also violent and bleh, like the bowl explodes into blood or whatever. That's kind of what I'm imagining. It doesn't have to be that edgy, but it can have the cartoon violence of that. That's like disturbingly realistic. Let's say.
I love the idea of like realistic animals being put in situations where they look like, these little characters juxtaposed with like a super cartoony environment or like landscape. So I think that would be a great visual.
I think the
game.
juxtaposition is the important part, whether
Yes.
it's like the extremes of real creatures in a cartoony world or like
Yes.
cartoony magical creatures in a horrific world.
I kind of like both. I think we need to have like I'm thinking BoJack Horseman, but there's like a bit of a horror spin to it.
Mm.
I don't know. What's this picture?
Don't know. That's not for me. Oh,
That's not
man,
fair. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
What
Well,
would you
we're
call
decided
it?
that the cat's an NPC. It's a horror RPG. Why are we talking to the cat in the woods? Maybe let's think about this situation here. Why have we met Tubby the cat, the witch cat in the woods?
Tubby the cat.
Tubby the cat.
What does I always like to think bottom up. So I like to think when we do our pitches, we're thinking mechanically first, and then we can
Okay.
figure out the whys of
Yeah.
Tubby the cat is in the woods. We can sprinkle that on at the end.
I mean,
think
you gotta be able
mechanically
to
we need
add
think
him
about it.
to your party, right? Like you
Okay,
want
so it's
him,
party based, right?
yeah,
Okay.
to follow you around.
So are we doing an
So
action
you're
RPG? Are
recruiting.
we doing turn based?
I'm imagining the approach to Tubby, and Tubby's there and goes, "So you decided to come and meet me," or something like that. Tubby knows.
So how about
He's
this?
powerful, but doesn't look like
It's-
much, right?
No, he's like a
a-
Yoda, but a fluffy cat.
Yeah,
Oh,
there you go,
yeah,
kind of like a
there you
Yoda-like
go.
figure. At first glance, not intimidating, but very experienced, deep knowledge of magic. Sorry, Jay, go ahead.
No, I
Yeah,
love
it's like
this.
what kind of. Me too. I think we're definitely using this, but we need to think mechanically. What excites us the most? Is this a game that is you're collecting party members to go on adventures and it's like a turn-based RPG, or is it you venture into the woods because you're trying to build out the roster for the village that you've started and you need a court mage,
Ooh.
so you venture into the dark woods to find your villagers, and Tubby the cat is one.
Wait, just hear me out for a second. Horror RPG village builder game. Okay.
Oh
Yeah,
my
you're-
god!
It's sort of like Valheim, but with NPCs that follow you around, companions or something, right?
Yeah.
And,
Okay.
No.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah,
no, I
you're
like
building
that. I
out
like that.
your village. Yeah.
Oh,
And
this
it's
is
like
great.
an M. Night Shyamalan type. Yes.
Yes. Do you guys
You go into the
okay.
woods and you find a road. You're like, oh my god, I'm not in a fantasy world. I'm not Shyamalan's The Village.
We were talking about loops, right? One of my favorite
Yeah.
survival games, like Valheim, is 7 Days to Die. Love that game.
Yeah.
The reason why I love 7 Days to Die is every 7 in-game days, 7 real-life hours, you get it. There's a blood moon, and you get attacked. So what if it's like Valheim? We're building up our village, but we're in the middle of these dark, terrible woods, and something's happening to these cute creatures who can die violently. What happens? What's this
100%.
thing that might happen?
What's the inciting incident? Why are we collecting these guys?
I feel like it's got to be animal related, right? We have to connect that piece a little more.
Yeah, like something really more ferocious than them, like werewolves or something. I don't know, or something with lots of claws.
Okay.
or
Yeah, like
something.
a predator.
Wait, I don't know.
Yeah.
But maybe the
Coyote.
tigers are Go ahead. Yeah.
Mutant
Tigers.
coyotes. I don't know. Don't they eat cats a lot? I don't know.
It could be like
What if it was aliens? Because you can get away with not.
Think about animals. Tina's like, how about aliens?
Alien werewolf.
You're assembling a squad of Earth creatures to fight this unknown enemy.
Oh, interesting. Okay, no, I see you. There's a contrast. Go on. I'm tracking. Yeah.
So you're selecting. You're hand selecting your squad from the animal kingdom.
Have you gone on a M. Night Shyamalan binge recently? Are you going to suggest another twist? Is that?
I like this.
Monsters versus alien vibes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, Predator is like a great IP, right?
There's been an apocalypse. Humanity doesn't exist, and magic was unleashed, Adventure Time style or something, and only animals who can talk and walk around defend Earth from aliens.
I will.
They're all cats, like Planet of the Apes, but like Planet of the Cats, and then they get invited by alien.
I want different creatures. I think.
You want? Okay, sure.
Cats. It could be all cats, but I also think there's a beautiful exploration where we can have animals doing jobs and roles in our village that kind of make sense for their. So like the cleaning maid is an anteater who like hoovers up all of the dust with their nose or something, and just like I want to make it silly, but also juxtapose it with the horrible forest and the aliens. All I'm thinking about is Predator and like seeing Arnold go around the jungle and coming across Tubby Cat. The movie would be infinitely better if Tubby Cat was in it.
As he waves his wand around, or waves his staff.
Oh my god.
Okay, and maybe mechanically, what are we looking at? So it sounds like you've got some survival inspiration. You're building up your village. There's magic, right? There's a variety of animals.
It has a little bit of everything. This game seems so chaotic. It's like
we have a bit of a crazy scope.
All right, let's add some stuff. I've got some stuff to add. Here we go. So because we've got such a blending of genres, let's just keep going. All right, it's a roguelike. So every day, what you do is you start with nothing and you go out and get villagers, and as you bring them back, they apply certain bonuses to your next venture out, and they join your party. So Toby the cat, be it a merchant or a court jester, can cast spells. So you're building your roster to go deeper and deeper into the woods to find more and more
what would the
varied sized cats. What do sloths give you? Oh my god, okay.
Some hyper intelligence or hyper wisdom.
Well, what kind of hat is the sloth wearing? I need to know.
What's a lazy hat? What hat do we associate?
A lazy hat.
A beret or something? I don't know.
A beret.
A beret. Yeah. Okay. He's a chef. He's a chef. He wears a beret, but he's a bit pompous. So he only cooks foods that take literal days to make. Like he'll be like, "Oh, I'm gonna make a ratatouille, or I'm gonna, make a stew."
Oh my god.
So they're always
a high
lazy, but they give
like,
you buffs. Yeah.
But three runs from now, I'm going to get an awesome buff. So it's an investment character. Yeah. Because it's roguelike, as you said, right?
Yeah.
What's that? Second?
I love this.
Beautiful pictures.
Yeah, these are amazing.
Yeah, but the roguelike element is if you go out on your run and push further and further with more of your party members, if they die on the run, they are permanently removed. We get some Darkest Dungeon kind of vibes. They are removed from your party. Their house is demolished. Maybe there's a certain amount of space you have in your village. So if you have 4 party members and you find one you want, you have to choose who to sacrifice and leave in the dark.
Oh no!
And take them back. See, I love the juxtaposition of like the darkness and the horrible stuff that's happening, but the crazy cute creatures. Like,
no, I get it, so and they're all dignified about it. They're like, I accept that I must be the sacrifice.
Yeah.
The camera moving away from the animal, like as they get enveloped by the darkness.
As the alien tractor beam lights up and pulls them up.
And you hear like a couple loud like magical castings, or I don't know what all if they all have magic or not, but you just hear like a yelp of like an animal's cry. and then they're just gone. And the survivors know they need to honor that animal death, cute as that animal was. All the more reason to survive and live another week or whatever.
But yeah,
There's
if
no
you die,
way you
your
could
village is
write
destroyed.
a story around this because you never know who the player is going to select to live and die. That would be
No,
chaotic.
you could write a story about this. Like if you had a selection of 10 different NPCs, we can go a little bit more structured and
10.
narrative based, like Octopath Traveler. Let's say we have 8, and you have 8 on each one of your attempts. You can get different people to come back to your village, and you can explore their story, which is unraveled on each subsequent run. So this is another reason to want to keep going and to do another run, because you want to discover more of that character's story. And we could even do a weird, I guess, kind of memento thing where, let's say you do a run with Tubby Cat. Tubby Cat gets halfway through his story, but then dies, and then you reset the run. Next time you get Tubby Cat, he remembers who you are and what was happening, and that becomes a narrative point. He's like, I died. What is happening? And then that becomes more of a narrative hook. I reckon we could do something interesting with that.
I like that.
Ludo would be a character. She'd have a little mining helmet on.
Tell us Ludo's character. What are the abilities?
Okay, Ludo is she's a designer. So Pete, for reference, I have a show called Design Delve, which is animated. That it's me and my dog Ludo, and in it we're design miners. So we go into the design mines and we craft games in these mines and stuff. And she's very loved in that show. She has a little hat on. I'm sure Eric will pull up a clip of Design Delve. And I'm trying to think about what Ludo's mechanically, what would she be doing? She would probably... Well, she's a miner, right? She'd have a little pickaxe, and she'd be able to break certain pathways that are blocked off. You'd be able to access them. So yeah, there's my show. You'd be able to access specific things. What else would she do mechanically? I'm trying to think.
Mining bonuses. Miners brew good coffee.
Okay.
Because they got to stay awake in the mines. That's another 7 days thing, actually. So you get energy bonuses when Ludo's in the party because they're gonna make coffee for everybody.
And traversal, yeah, she can break specific obstacles and she can allow you to create shortcuts. So she has a rope that she can dangle down, and that creates a shortcut that you can use on future runs. In the chat, passively finds treasures. Yep, passively finds treasures. Being a miner, of course. Flashlight from the helmet. Okay, yep. There's lots of abilities when you're a miner. That sounds great, yeah.
Does this sound like a potential Hollywood idea?
Yeah, Pete, what do you think?
We turn this into a movie, Pete. Come on.
We'll take it to Scorsese right now and see what he thinks.
He'll email us back, guys. I love it. Let's make this happen.
Yeah.
Oh, God.
Oh, my God.
This is the last time any of us heard from Pete.
Although you can really do an animated series, I can totally see a short form animated series all day long. Yes.
Oh, there you go. Yeah. It's silly.
Well, I already animate Ludo and me, so let's just make Ludo the lead. You play as Ludo, and then we'll make it happen, won't we, pup? There'll be a cool story about cats and dogs. In the interest of survival, needing to resolve their differences, Tubby Cat and Ludo. I don't like you, and you don't like me. We have to work together to kill these aliens, et cetera, et cetera. We have to work together to kill these aliens.
Well, the cat,
escape the dark wood.
If we're talking about the cat, I'm thinking like the cat feels like a Cartman mage kind of character. I don't know, like the.
Oh, okay. And a reverend cat. Okay, I like this. And what is that Cartman-like figure? Yeah, go ahead. What's that?
He's like a sage like Yoda, but a total jerk, and like
talks down to everyone.
Cartman, and then you build out.
I like that. He's just a nihilist. He's like, it's the end of the world. Fuck it. I got my magic. I'll be okay. I'm only working with you guys because the coffee's good.
Yeah, I want coffee, and you guys are all jerks. But then you rub his belly, and all of a sudden he's super amicable. Whatever.
Yeah, but then if you get the swap, he can make the food.
Okay, whatever.
They really like them.
That's amazing. Oh, I love it. I wasn't expecting anything from that photo other than just smiles. So.
Well, you give us good prompts, Tina.
Got a game.
We got a good crew.
There you go. So we have one more question that came in from Dark Jackal. If you want to read it, Jay, or I can.
Yeah, sure. Ba-ba-ba-ba.
So you can look
Let me
beyond
find
your puppy.
Okay. I've got to answer. You'll be okay. So from Dark Jackal, $5 dues says, thanks for the conversation as always. Pete, is there a type or style of game you would like to see more examples of? Anything underrepresented in your opinion?
I mean, yeah, there's several. I love art, you know? I mean, art sells to me. So and indie games do this more than anyone, but like Stray I thought was beautiful, and so there's tons of them. And so for me, there's a couple things. Art style is one, like those kinds of like really vibrant art styles, that and like telling stories that there just needs to be more inclusive stories, just in general, you know. And I think finding the right art style to match with just more inclusive stories that you don't see in AAA as much, although they're happening. I'm trying to think of like a really cool art style that Stray is one, but there's just man.
May I throw one out there while you think of one, Pete? Just
do
you guys ever play The Neverhood?
Yeah,
No.
Late 90s adventure game.
That was a DreamWorks game. Yeah.
Oh, was it really?
Yeah.
It
was a really funny game.
Yeah, it was like kind of surreal and a strange world. I'd be curious to see, because I played The Neverhood, but I kind of dropped it because you know how adventure games can be, right? Like they're just difficult to understand or just play. And I think that would be a pretty cool one to see some sort of in other media, a film, a show, something. Would be pretty cool.
Like an Aardman. I was kind of inspired by the Aardman movies that were happening at DreamWorks as well.
Say that again.
It was inspired by the Aardman movies, like the stop motion clay, right? And that was
Claymation.
Right. Yeah.
Exactly. And I thought that was really, I thought that was just really, very clever at the time, and it was a funny game, if I remember correctly.
Yeah,
it's been a minute. I mean, yeah.
Props to the funny games, right?
Well, I love games that make you laugh. Sorry, not to get into art styles versus not, but like even Grand Theft Auto has funny shit, right? Just hilarious in certain ways.
Yeah.
Even when, you know, but I mean, in general, games that make you kind of chuckle once in a while. Fallout does it here and there, you know, Fallout 4 at least from I haven't played 76. But you know what I mean? I'm sure you guys have ideas too. I'd love to, you know.
Yeah, for me, it's an expression of, I love, because I'm a game designer. I was speaking to it earlier, I always think bottom up first. I think of mechanics and then trickle down the story next. But that's not to discount how important I find story and narrative and what we're saying. For me, games are art, and all good art should just make you feel. I want games that make me feel something, whether that's, you know, crying with laughter or crying because I'm so emotionally attached to, you know, the characters and the stories being told, or anger, you know, or fear. That's what I think this medium does better than any other. So if a game can, you know, make me feel, then I'm happy.
What about you, Tina?
What, in terms of feelings?
Like, what would be a game that or a genre that you would like to see brought to seen more in film, I guess. I kind of threw a game out there, but I meant like the adventure genre, the surreal adventure genre. That's also funny. But yeah, what might be one for you?
A genre thrown into a movie?
Was that what they said? I thought that was a question of what would be a good genre that could be better represented in film.
I can't even remember anymore.
Maybe I misremembered it.
Let me read it again. Pete, is there a type or style of game that you would like to see more examples of? Basically, just what kind of games or genre do you think are underrepresented, and what do you want to see more of?
Oh, I misunderstood the question. Go ahead, Tia.
Still a good question.
Yeah, it's a good question.
I would. This is hard.
It is, isn't it?
I think new fighting games don't come out as often. I would love.
Yeah, it's all established brands, isn't it? Right?
Yeah.
That is true. That is true.
Maybe
We got Riot's one,
but
2 XKOs coming out. which is an interesting spin on the genre. But you're right, they don't come out a lot. But I think the best thing to come out of those games are the narratives. Some of my favorite things about the new Mortal Kombat games is specifically the campy, self-aware story rather than the gameplay. You know, so I want to see more of that.
Yeah. But yeah, I'm sure there's probably some opportunity there, like a void to fill.
Yeah. Bong. All right, that bong was my cue for. I think that is going to do it for Dev Heads for this episode. Unless anybody has anything to say, interrupt me. Literally, just shout at me if you do have anything. But if not, I want to say thank you to all our patrons and all of the viewers who have joined us live. I want to say thank you to Mikey and Tina as always, and Pete. Thank you so much for joining us. We've really enjoyed having you here.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It was fun.
Thank you, Pete.
Thank you, Pete.
Yeah,
and thank you to Eric in the back being the best producer ever, as always, putting up all of our images instantly, getting all of those goose and gags going. Big shout out to Eric. But yeah, thank you so much, and we will see you in the next episode. Thank you, guys. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.